Yeah, we've got a couple who have had to go into school, so they can't attend it. So they've been asking, you know, again, because of all the things I've said, they don't want to miss, you know, what's coming out.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll do our best. We'll make sure that they get something. And we've got sessions that we're going to book in across the year as well, haven't we? So we can make sure that everybody gets that chance to have a face-to-face chat as well over Zoom. Yeah.
Good. Sounds good.
So I'm thinking, how many people are we expecting roughly, Dave?
I think there were about 30 the other day.
We've got about 20 without us. I think we've got about 24 so far.
Okay.
Right.
Should we just give it one more minute, and then people can always join in a bit later if they need to?
Yeah. I think Tonya signed in.
Tonya's here, yeah.
Tonya will probably check the list and see who's missing, because she knows who's not coming.
I'm checking it now, Dave.
Oh, yeah. You are good, thank you. We should have known that was happening already. I need a Tonya in my life.
Dear. You know why I've gone grey, don't you?
I'm going to say Dave may disagree.
Oh.
She keeping you in order?
Can you ever keep a man in order?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'm going to turn my camera off now. I'm turning my camera off before this goes any further. Right. To anyone who's watching, right, I'll join in a bit later. I'm just going to make sure anyone else needs to be admitted, but I will be back in the presentation a bit later. I'm going to Emma, you're starting today, aren't you?
Thank you, Simon. Can you see my screen now? Are we good to go?
Yeah, we're good to go.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you everybody for being so prompt this morning. That really helps us get cracking straight away with the session. You may have heard that little chat with Dave there. We will send something through to Tonya after the session, hopefully the recording, but you'll have that then to look back on. So let's get started. I just want to start with a little bit of an introduction. Who are we? And more importantly, what can we do for you? So Simon and I are both experienced teachers. We've both worked in mainstream schools, but then the majority of our careers have actually been in pupil referral units. So just to set the context, in Birmingham, there are 3 primary pupil referral units and I think 6 secondary pupil referral units. And those are centres that children go to when they've been permanently excluded from school because of social and emotional and mental health difficulties. So they've lost their mainstream place and they go into one of those centres. So Simon was centre manager at the primary centre in the south of the city, and I worked for quite a few years in the north of the city, managing the outreach team across the board. So those centres are responsible for the education of the permanently excluded pupils and also going into schools and supporting to reduce exclusions and help support staff in schools. About 4 years ago, Simon and I decided to take the leap and set up Beacon School Support. So now we work in probably about 50 schools across the city. We go in and do face-to-face work. We'll do observations, anything to support staff and support schools with managing challenging behaviour. That's one part of the business. The other part of the business that we're working really hard on, particularly in lockdown, which has been good for us in a way, is we're building up masses and masses of resources that people can access online. So you can see the website there. We've got free resources. We write blogs, newsletters. We send those out about fortnightly as continuous little reminders, little tips, little tricks about behaviour. We've got a whole package of support for schools, which is Behaviour 360, which some of the primary schools have bought into, and also Inner Circle, which some of the secondary schools have got. So in September, it will be worth checking in with your school to see if they've accessed those resources on the monthly subscription, because then obviously you'll have access to those things too. We are also going to plan monthly drop-in sessions across this year where you can come along, and what we're thinking, and we'll adapt as we go along, but we're thinking of maybe half the session where we deliver some aspect of training to you, and then the other half of the session will be an opportunity for you to come along and raise issues around behaviour, whether that's management of individual pupils, whether it's whole classes, whether it's groups, anything to do with behaviour. And those sessions will be awareness raising, but giving strategies and support to you to help with behaviour. We'll also be available, I know Dave's putting together a kind of panel of experts. So in between those monthly sessions, if you've got burning issues that you want to ask about, or you want a little bit of support with, or you want a sounding board for, then you're welcome to email us and I'll send through our details to you. And we'll do our best to support you with those issues as well. We haven't got a magic wand, unfortunately. We'd be really rich if we had. But what we have got is a lot of experience of teaching children with various degrees of challenging behaviour, and we've got a lot of experience of supporting teachers just like you in schools as well. So I know it's a very tricky time to start your teaching career, and your first year of teaching was going to be tough anyway, let's face it, but we're really aware of that, and I know that Dave's super aware of that, so we're putting that support in. So do rest assured that you're not just going to be left on your own. You'll have your own contacts and mentors in schools as well, but we will be there to support you with things as they crop up along the way. So I hope that's a little bit reassuring to you. What we want to share this morning then are 12 key strategies for managing challenging behaviour, but also thinking about this now ahead of time will help you to minimise the amount of challenging behaviour that comes your way. Because there are definitely things that you can say and do which will help you to adopt a persona, if you like, where you're able to spot things early and deal with them, because with behaviour that is a really big key. Get in there quickly and deal with things before they escalate and get too hard to handle. And also you'll be able to put systems into place that make the children feel more comfortable, so they're less likely to exhibit that challenging behaviour. So that's what we're going to talk about this morning. So number one, whenever we deliver this type of training, we always say, if you forget everything else, don't forget this. The number one rule, if you like, about managing challenging behaviour is, at all costs, do your best to avoid a dead-end confrontation. So a dead-end confrontation is where you accidentally get into a situation with a child where you are telling them that they must do something and they are saying that they're not going to. So a classic example is, perhaps you've got a girl playing up in your class, you've given reminders, you've told her what she needs to do, you've checked that she can still do the work, she's not doing it, you're getting to the end of your patience. So in the end you say, Jennifer, you need to leave the room, go outside. Now the tricky bit here is, if Jennifer turns around and says, no, I'm not going, what are you going to do? And the real key difficulty with dead-end confrontations is that they are often played out in public. So you're saying she's got to leave the room, she's saying she's not going to, the other students are looking to you to see what happens next. That puts you in a really vulnerable position, because it's kind of a win-lose situation. So one of you needs to win, and therefore one of you is going to lose. If you lose that confrontation, boy, does it knock your confidence for a start, but also you lose credibility. And everybody else, it's very exciting. It's better than telly to stop what you're doing and watch what goes on there. So everybody else is watching, and that puts you under pressure. It also puts the pupil under pressure to save face. So if they've said no, they're not going, it's very hard for them to back down from that and actually get up and slink out of the classroom. So when you've got that audience there, when you've got people watching, it adds pressure on both sides. So where you can, you're going to try and avoid getting into that situation where you've accidentally created a confrontation by giving an ultimatum in front of other people. So you're going to think instead about what other ways can you manage this behaviour so that you don't end up getting to that crunch point where somebody's got to lose. Ideally, we're going to look to create a win-win situation where actually you get what you want and the pupil gets what they want as well. So the other strategies in this presentation are ideas about how to go about managing behaviour in that way and thereby avoiding a dead-end confrontation. So you might have got into a dead-end confrontation with people in your life already, with siblings, with partners, with your dog. You know what it feels like. It's not a good place to be. So as soon as you feel like you're stepping down that road, it's time to stop and not take it any further. And you learn this as you go along. Every time you try something and it goes well, then great. Every time you try something and it doesn't go well, and that will happen, you will make mistakes, we all do that, and a lot of behaviour management is trial and error. As long as you learn from those errors and try your hardest not to keep on repeating that same mistake, then that's all good. That is how you will grow your toolbox of strategies. So everybody says the wrong thing sometimes, everybody does the wrong thing sometimes. The important part is don't beat yourself up about it, because that is going to happen. Reflect back on what happened and think about what could you have done differently. There's a really famous quote, I think it's Henry Ford, that says, if we keep doing the same, we will keep getting the same. So what we need to do is, instead of being in that cycle of the pupil does something, we do something, the pupil does it again, we do something, instead of that, in order to change the student's behaviour, we need to change our response to that behaviour. It doesn't mean backing down, it doesn't mean letting them get away with it. It means being more strategic, being a little bit cleverer about the way that we manage things so that we shape the response into something that's more desirable for us, but also for the pupil as well. And thereby the rest of the class benefit from that as well. So if you feel like you're going down that path, or you feel like you've accidentally created a confrontation, don't try to see it through to the death. Don't think, well, I'm the teacher, they have to do what I say, so I'm going to keep on hammering this message home. That's not going to work. And throughout this presentation, bear in mind, we're not talking about every child that you deal with. For some children, if you have to eject them from the room, and I hope you won't, but if you do ask them to leave, they will get up and go. So that's fine. But we're talking about that handful of children that you are going to come across who, for a whole raft of reasons, and that's another training session completely, are going to struggle to follow instructions all of the time. And you'll quickly learn who they are, and the more you meet your classes, the more you spend time with them, you will work out which children need something a little bit different, and you'll build that into your practice. So you'll build up your range of tools that you've got to manage behaviour, and you'll realise really quickly that one size doesn't fit all. So there'll be some things that you do that meet most children's needs, but then there's always going to be others that need something a little bit bespoke to them. And this is very much about what Adrian talked about on Friday, about using those micro moments, building relationships, having that little bit of time when you're walking down the corridor to have a chat to somebody. Once you start to build those positive relationships, that's where you'll get respect for each other, and that's where children will be more inclined to do what you ask. If they think that you like them, you care about them, you want them to be there, they are much more likely to follow your instructions, even when things are a bit tricky. If they think you're just being bossy, you're trying to control me, you don't like me, you don't want me to be here, why should they do what you say? So wherever we can, we're going to be alert and try not to get into a dead-end confrontation. And if we feel like we've started going down that path, we're going to stop, take a breath, have a think about what else can we do instead. So now I'm going to go on to the what else can we do instead. So at all costs, avoid dead-end confrontations. Okay, so the second thing then is about your presence in the room. So I bet we can all remember teachers from our own schooling. I know I had a really mixed bag. When I think back to the teacher that I liked and respected most, that was my English teacher. And she was very energetic, enthusiastic, inspiring, and she was warm and friendly and motivating. And I think about the teacher that I hated the most, and that was my maths teacher, and he was the opposite of all of that. So there is a trick to thinking about your classroom persona. You'll already know from the experience you've had in class that sometimes teaching is about acting, and it's about putting on a front, and sometimes it is about pretending that you feel confident even when you don't. The really good trick about confidence is actually when you fake confidence, people can't tell. It looks like real confidence. And the more that you pretend that you are confident, the more that you give feedback to your brain that says, I'm okay, I've got this, I can handle this, and the more confident you become. So it's important when we think about confidence to think about the difference between being assertive, which comes with confidence, and aggressive, and also passive as well. So if you imagine a scale of 1 to 10, and at number 1, you've got passive. So passive teachers are very quietly spoken. They will avoid eye contact. They will make their bodies as small as they can. They don't want to get noticed. They don't want to get involved. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. Do you think that children respond to passive adults? No, they don't. They walk all over them. They walk away from them. They ignore them. They do what they want. So nobody responds to passive adults. If passive is 1, at the opposite end of that scale is 10, and that is aggressive. So aggressive adults make themselves big, they are loud, they draw attention to themselves, they might point, they might shout, they get up close to people. Do you think that children respond to aggressive adults? Well, some do because they are frightened, and that is not what we're going for. So if you imagine that 1 is passive and 10 is aggressive, when you're dealing with behaviour, you need to be assertive. And that on that scale, that is around a 6 or a 6.5. So when you're going about your daily business, you might be a 5, that's kind of neutral in the middle. When dealing with behaviour, you need to up that a little bit to about a 6 or a 6.5, because the children need to hear a difference and see a difference and recognise that you do mean what you say and your instructions do need to be followed. So let's think about what assertive body language and assertive tone of voice looks like. So assertive people, even when they're pretending and you can't tell, so practice this because nobody will know the difference, and the more you practice it, the better you get. Assertive people have open posture, open body language. So they stand up tall, they don't cross their arms in front of them or hold things in front of them or hide behind the desk. They get out, they circulate around the classroom. That's really important. They hold their head up and they make eye contact with everybody. Not a great long stare because that's aggressive, and that will trigger some pupils' brains. If they think that you are staring at them and they are hypervigilant, that will trigger something. So be careful with your eye contact, but let it be seen that you are sweeping the room, watching everything that's going on in a friendly way. It doesn't need to be a death stare, but you're making eye contact. You're not frightened to look around the room and see what's going on. Make good eye contact, open posture. Assertive tone is a low, slow, controlled voice. Now, this is easy when there is no problem and everything's going swimmingly. This becomes difficult when you feel stressed or you feel panicky or you feel nervous. So be reflective, Recognize when you feel like that, and then take active steps to control yourself first. So unless there is a fire, there is pretty much always time for you to take a deep breath and think about what you are going to say. And be super careful that what you say isn't an ultimatum, because then there we are back at number one with the dead end confrontation. So it's about taking a breath and intentionally slowing your voice down. Can you hear the difference there? And that has a really brilliant ripple effect. It communicates to the student that you're dealing with that you are calm and in control. It communicates to all of the onlookers that you have got this situation under control. Even if you don't really believe that, they don't know that. And it also gives biofeedback to your brain that says, you can handle this, you can do it. So practice being assertive, and practice being aware of when you don't feel assertive. So you are going to feel nervous. You are lots and lots and lots of times throughout my teaching career, I've been in a situation where my heart's been beating really fast and I've been thinking, uh-oh, I don't know what's going to happen here, particularly in pupil referral units where there's often a high level of very aggressive behaviour towards each other, towards the staff, and your heart's beating really fast. What won't help is if the children think that you're not in control, that you can't handle this. That's scary. They need to know that the adults can handle this situation. And the way to do that is to pretend, and they don't know the difference. So it's about taking a breath, slowing your breathing down, slowing your voice down. Because what we tend to do when we feel nervous or we feel panicked, we talk faster, we talk louder, we talk higher, and that escalates the situation. Then you're going to get other pupils in the room who think, whoa, what's going on here? There's something exciting going on. You can feel the electricity in the air. So instead of that, we're going to make a conscious effort to bring that down. Another great tip about being assertive is to buy yourself some time as well. So there's been plenty of situations where I haven't known what to do next. I'm not going to say that, but what I will do is buy myself some time. I might say, we'll talk about this later. That has served me really well, actually. And then walk away, move away, and think, what am I going to do next? What's my next move? When you delay the action like that, you give everybody time to calm down, and you give yourself some time to plan what your response will be. You must make sure that you do revisit that issue and you do talk about it later. If you say, we'll talk about this later, and then you don't, children learn, actually, you're going to forget about it. You don't mean what you say, and you'll lose respect that way. The other children in the class also need to see and to know that you do revisit that issue later on. So it might be if there's been a problem with behaviour, I don't know, Billy's been refusing to do his work or whatever it is, and you say, Billy, we'll talk about this later. And then you move right away from Billy, you take the pressure off him, you give him time to cool off and to think about what he's going to do next, which hopefully might be a good choice. But then maybe at playtime, just as you're sending everybody out to break, you say, oh, Billy, can I just have a quick word before you go out to play? So the class see that you are following up, and then you have a one-to-one conversation with Billy, which is much less public. It's not going to get into that public dead-end confrontation because the public have gone, you've moved the audience away. And most kids are more amenable on a one-to-one than they are in front of all their mates when everybody's looking and the spotlight is on them and they're trying to save face. So that would be a good way to manage that situation. So practice being assertive. Think about moving to sort of 6.5. Be careful about tipping over into being too aggressive. If you get too shouty, too confrontational, children lose respect for you. And some will comply because they're scared, but some will definitely butt against that and they will meet aggression with aggression. And then you've got lots of aggression going on, which we're trying to avoid. Okay, these two link in really nicely then. So number 3 is think before you speak. So again, don't issue an ultimatum that you cannot follow through. So sometimes it can be tempting when you can't think of anything else and you say, if you carry on doing that, I'm going to phone your dad. Well, if you're not going to phone dad, or if dad's not going to pick up the phone, if you can't make that happen, don't issue that consequence. That is an empty threat, and children quickly realise that if you don't follow through, you're not to be trusted, and you're not to be believed, and you're not to be respected. So think carefully about any consequences that you issue, because you do have to make them happen. You will have to use consequences sometimes, and definitely get familiar with your school's behaviour policy and know those systems inside out from day one, because that's your backup. That's what you hang your behaviour management on. Because when you're new and children have been there before you, they think they know best and they think you won't know what to do. Make sure you do know what the systems are, and only issue consequences that you know you are going to be able to make happen. Somebody said there then, so why did I say that I'd keep him in for 13 lunch breaks? The thing is, they've obviously lost their rag and said, right, that's it, you're staying in for the next 2 weeks. Trouble is, he's got to stay in now and supervise that for the next 2 weeks as well. And can he make that happen? If he can't, the child knows, well, they said that, but actually that's not going to happen. So avoid making empty threats. Oh, I'm going to hand over now to Simon and let him take over this little bit here. If I just stop.
Right then. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is really set ourselves up for success, and we need to send the right message from the moment that the pupils walk through the door. So there's a couple of things we need to be thinking about here. The first is preparation. Am I prepared? If the kids walk in and they can see that you're occupied sorting things out at your desk, or fixing something, or setting up the laptop in the corner of the room, or whatever it is you're doing, they know that their behavior is not being monitored. And everyone always behaves better when they feel like their behavior, everyone always behaves better when they feel like their behavior is being monitored. If you want proof of this, go on Twitter, where it's anonymous and people think that what they're doing isn't really being monitored, and they can say what they want and no one's really watching or noticing. And you see the most dreadful things going on. Kids especially behave better when they feel like there's an adult there paying attention and watching what they're doing. So we need to think about what the kids experience walking in through the door. So the first thing is we need to make sure that we're there on time, that we're punctual. Ideally, they're just before the kids. And as the kids walk in, what we need to do is just pay them some attention. And there's a guy called Bill Rogers who's written loads of books on behavior management and classroom management. If you've not read any, I recommend that you do. They're great books. And he talks about managing behavior on a graduated scale, always starting with the least obtrusive behavior strategies and working up to the most intrusive. Ideally, what we don't want to do is jump in with the most obtrusive strategies. The most obtrusive strategy is calling across the room, shouting at someone, asking someone to, come to the front of the room and talk about their behavior. They will set you up for a dead-end confrontation where everyone's watching. The best behavior strategies, when they work well, are the ones that sort of go under the radar, the ones that the other kids don't notice. And the least obtrusive thing you can do, as Emma mentioned earlier, is pay someone eye contact. So as the kids come into the room, we're just making friendly eye contact. When you make eye contact with someone, there's like a moment there. There's a moment of recognition where the two of you just sort of pay attention to each other and kind of acknowledge each other. That's the kind of moment you're looking for. So as the kids come in, we're paying them friendly eye contact. We're smiling. We're not staring them down like a psycho killer. Welcoming them into the room, and ideally having something out on the tables to do. When kids are occupied and there is something for them to do, You're less likely to get something called dead time, which is time when kids are just hanging around waiting. Dead time is where you get loads of low-level behavior. It's where low-level behavior takes root. So we pay eye contact as they come into the room, direct them to a task, and then the kids who are a bit slower, we can just give them some friendly reminders. Eye contact is really, really powerful. Really, really powerful. Don't underrate it. If you're in a primary school, and I know this is mostly secondary, but we do have a couple of primary-based teachers here today, in assembly, make sure you can sit where you can make eye contact with the kids while they're in the hall. The first thing they will do before they chat to their mates in the middle of the line is turn their head to check whether they're going to get caught or not. They're going to check whether the teacher's watching. And in that moment, if you can catch their eye, then you can stop that behavior from happening 9 times out of 10, maybe not always, but 9 times out of 10, you can nip that behavior in the bud. So make sure that you're sitting forwards of your class and sort of lazily looking up and down. So when their heads turn, you can just catch their eye in the moment. In the classroom, when kids are working, make sure you sit where you can sort of gaze around the whole class from time to time. You don't want to be facing a wall. You always want your back to the wall, because again, in the classroom, before someone goes off task and does something silly or starts a chat or whatever, what they're going to do is they're going to look across the room to see if the teacher will notice, to see if they're being monitored. And in that moment, if you can just catch their eye, you know, you're sending the message, I'm monitoring what you're doing. And at that point, you know, you're going to be fairly dumb to start a conversation. You know, you're going to do it when someone's not watching. So eye contact is a really underrated way of quietly monitoring attention. I'll give you another example. Well, a really good way of doing this is always making sure that you sit with your back to a wall. Always be looking into the room. So imagine that you've set the kids to work. Maybe they're, I don't know, graphing an equation or something. You've got a couple of kids on one side of the room and they need a bit of help and they put their hand up. The natural thing to do as a teacher is to go across and start helping them with the work. At that point, it's really easy to get sucked into just focusing on those couple of kids, which is perfectly natural because you're trying to help them with their work. But, you know, you think that the kids behind you are carrying on with their graphing of their equation. But actually, what you don't realize is anything could be going on, right? Or if you've got your back to half of the room, those kids will know that the behavior is not being monitored and not paying attention. You're not paying attention to them. A true story, that the worst I saw happen with this was when I worked in the pupil referral units. We were told always be aware of where the kids are in the room because some of them have quite violent histories. And we had a supply teacher in, and she had all of the introduction and, you know, all of the kind of, right, well, don't leave your phone out, make sure everything's locked away, and always make sure you know where the children are. And she was sat at a table helping a child with his work, and behind her was a child with a chair walking up behind her, about to bring that down on the back of her head. And we all had to run across and intervene. That's an extreme example. You're not going to see that in mainstream. Hopefully you won't see that in mainstream, but having a good awareness, being able to make eye contact, knowing where your kids are, and being able to nip things in the bud is really, really powerful. It's always easier to stop a car from crashing than to fix things after the car has crashed. The next thing we're going to do is look at exploiting your seating plan, because it's one of your greatest weapons and it's also one of your most underrated weapons. Here you can see, I don't know if any of you are married, but when people get married and you're, you know, planning the meal afterwards, the bride and groom often take a lot of care thinking about where they're going to place each person so they have a great experience, so that they're with someone they know, so the conversation's going to flow. You don't put lots of strangers together. We need to think that way about where we position kids in the room and how we use our seating plan. Now, I know at the moment with COVID-19, things are strange, they're unusual. We're being forced into setting out rooms in a certain way, a less social way, maybe a more Victorian way. But what I want to leave you with is a set of skills. This is a temporary situation. Hopefully, before long, classrooms will be able to go back to normal, vaccination will be available. So the skills that I'm going to talk about next will apply into the long-term future for your careers. And equally, if things are wrong with the environment in your classroom, they're going to make the behavior worse. And these are things that we can fix very, very easily. So I'm going to give you a quick task. Here, we've got a classic layout for a primary classroom. And the children sitting at the tables are all color-coded. Okay, so we've got some kids in orange, we've got some kids in green, we've got some kids in red. And I want you to imagine, it hasn't come out on the slide, but on the left-hand side there's a wall, and on the right-hand side there's a wall. And what I would like you to do in the chat box, if I can open the chat box, what I'd like you to do in the chat box is to write down what you think the color coding, what each color in this code represents. Why are some kids color coded in red? Why are some kids color coded in orange? And why are some kids color coded in green? And we'll talk about how just small adjustments to the classroom layout can have a big payoff in terms of behavior. So I'm going to pop my camera off for a moment. What I'd like you to do is to write red and then tell me why people are in red, orange, why people are in orange, and green, why people are in green. Someone's put in their ability. Nothing to do with ability, okay? You don't have to infer any information. Everything you need is in front of you. So why are some kids in red? Just write red equals something, orange equals something, green equals something. I'm going to turn my camera off just for a moment and give you just 60 seconds to figure out what the color coding could be. I'm going to give you another clue. It has nothing to do with the children's behavior. It's to do with the physical layout of the room. And it's got nothing to do with ability. Okay, so we've got a range of ideas here. We've got orange equals children who help red children with any difficulties. We've got red equals children with their back to the front. We've got red, you can't see what they're doing. Lots of good ideas. So here are the answers. So if we take the children in red at the bottom, all four of those children, every time the teacher talks, or every time they need to look at the board, they have to turn around. They physically have to turn their bodies around. During the lesson, over time, this becomes more wearing. Over time, if you've got children who find it hard to focus, hard to concentrate, it distracts them, it throws them off the task, it creates friction, it creates a barrier in between those kids and their work. The kids in red at the top left and the top right, they can't see the screen, okay? Their angle, their viewing angle is so poor, they can't see what's being written on that whiteboard, especially nowadays with whiteboard and glare. If you're using a television screen, often they're coated in anti-reflective surfaces, but from those side angles, they can't see what's going on the screen or on the whiteboard. So kids with red have a massive barrier in between them and their learning. That will lead to low-level behavior as they fall off task, and it's an avoidable thing. The kids in orange, they are sat very, well, let's take the kids in the middle in orange. They are sat with the backs of their chairs very, very close. So every time they have to pull out their chair, every time they need to go and get a resource, when they come in and out of the room, their chair backs almost bang alongside each other. And that's really, really stressful. That puts you off task, that throws you off task. It's another barrier to learning. The kids in orange on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, well, they've got their chair backs right up against the wall. So it's really uncomfortable to feel cramped in, to feel hemmed in. That does not create a pleasant working environment. The kids in green, they're fine. They've got a line of view to the teacher. Their chair backs aren't too close. They can get on kind of freely with their work. Here's a better example of what a classroom looks like. Now, this is boring, but it's classic for a reason. Everyone here can see the board just by turning their heads. Everyone can get in and out. Everyone's got room. Everyone's got a good view. What we've done here is we've removed all the barriers to learning that we can to make learning easy, to make it quick. Now, when we go back to school in September, lots of schools are going to be having to use a more traditional layout where you've got your table set out in twos. The problem with that layout is it's a space killer. Now, if you look at this picture here, our teacher can easily walk around the room. And I'm going to talk about this in a moment in more detail, but our teacher can easily walk around the room. If you have a layout where the tables are set out in twos or long rows, often it makes it difficult for the teacher to access every part of the space. And that's going to be a real issue because there's something we're going to talk about next, proximity control. Proximity control is the easiest way of managing behavior in the entire world. If you've got a body, you can do it. And all it involves is, if you've got a couple of kids and they're starting to get a little bit noisier in the classroom, what you do is you just go and walk and stand next to the desk. And that's it. That's proximity control. You will create around you a pool of calm because, you know, if you're standing next to a couple of tables, again, coming back to the monitoring idea, those kids know that if they do something, they're not going to get away with it because the teacher is right there next to them, right? Physically right there. They're unlikely to get away with anything. So the teacher's presence, the adult's presence creates this kind of pool of calm around them. Now, if your classroom layout is such that you're trapped at the front of the room, the kids at the back of the room know that you'll never get over there physically, so you can never really monitor what they're up to. If you've got long rows that are very tightly packed and you can't walk along those rows, you've got a real issue there because the kids in the middle of those rows know that physically you're not close to them. You're not giving them a physical reminder that they're being monitored. So classroom layout has a huge impact on classroom behavior, and it's one that we can fix very, very easily. So when you go back into classrooms in September, you will find, no doubt, that lots of these classrooms have been set out in twos. That's wasteful in terms of space because you do need space between the tables. Make sure you can get around, and also make sure you keep circulating around the room. Teaching is a profession where you should get in 10,000 steps easily every day. The teachers who stay in the corner, sitting on their laptop all the time, are going to have more behavior issues because the kids on the opposite side of the room know that they're not being monitored. So once you've set the task, don't stay anywhere for too long. Walk around the room. If you stop somewhere, don't stop for too long. Or if you're going to work with a table, say in primary, you sit with that table for 5 minutes, then get up and walk around again. When you set a task, don't jump in and support a couple of students. Set a task, walk around the room and settle everyone with your physical presence, then settle and help children that need help. Since we've had interactive whiteboards, there's been an interesting shift in how people teach. Actually, if you watch sort of 15 years ago when it was all whiteboards and blackboards, think about where the teacher wanted to stand when they wanted to command the room, right? Or think about an actor. Where does an actor stand when they want to command the room? They stand front and center in the stage, okay? That way they can command the audience. Everyone's looking at them. Since people have been teaching with laptops and interactive whiteboards, you often find the sockets are in the corner of the room. And what you find is something like this. Now, you know, the person delivering the lesson is off in the wings somewhere, off to the side, almost incidental. They're not there. The audience is looking for the actor, but they can't find them because the teacher is on a laptop in the corner of the room where they're not a presence at all. So if you want to talk to the class, deliver a message to the whole class, or have a presence in the room, make sure you are stood front and center. all those interactive whiteboards, all those new televisions, they all have ways of moving pages on. They do not need you to be glued to your laptop. Get familiar with the software, get familiar with the hardware, learn how to use it, because you're going to really constrain your presence in the classroom if you're stuck in a laptop off to the side of the room. And then we're going to have a quick look at proximity praise before I hand back to Emma. Proximity praise is a great method for injecting positivity into the classroom. So if you've got some children, say you've got a set of children lined up and you're waiting for them to be quiet, well, what you could do is you could say, Jason, you're talking in the line, I'm waiting for you for you to be ready. Billy, you're talking in the line, I'm waiting for you to be ready. What that does is it shines a spotlight of attention on kids who are doing the wrong thing. And you're also broadcasting a message to the rest of the class that this adult is currently awarding attention to kids that are talking and chattering and being slow. So the kids that want attention, often the dawdlers and the talkers, they want you to shine that spotlight on them so everyone sees them. You're actually reinforcing that negative behavior. Proximity praise is a way of giving praise that encourages kids who are doing the wrong thing to switch and do the right thing, because often the kids doing the wrong thing, actually what they want is behavior. So we're going to re-educate them on how to get attention in the right way. So imagine you've got a line, say, of like 5 or 6 people. You've got a child in the middle who's jumping around and being silly. You pick the person on their left and you say something like, Bilal, and then you're really specific with your praise. Bilal, that's great. I like the way you're standing in the line. You're ready to go. Then you pick the student on the opposite side of them and you say something like, Jenny, well done. You're ready to go. I can see you're ready. Then you turn to the person who's jumping up and down. You catch their eye and then you say, and Emmett, I can see that you're ready to go. And you catch their eye because they want that moment of praise. They want that moment of recognition. When you praised 2 or 3 children around the person doing the wrong thing, often they will start to conform, because actually what they're after is your attention. And you've told them, I'm not currently awarding attention for the negative behavior. I'm currently awarding attention for good behavior. So if you find yourself, it's a Thursday afternoon, you're kind of drudging through the lesson, you feel like you're moaning a lot, start giving lots of proximity praise, because it makes the kids who are doing the right thing feel good about themselves, but you're also telling the kids who are doing the wrong thing, I'm not awarding attention for this behavior, I am telling you how to get my attention. But obviously, the minute they switch and the minute they stop doing the stupid stuff and start getting on task, you have to jump on immediately with praise. So you're feeding that need. And over time, we train them to get attention for positive things rather than negative things. And I am going to stop sharing there. Emma.
Oh, I am here. Hold on a tick. Let me just bring my screen down. Thank you. Okay. There we go. Smooth transitions there. Okay, so what I want to do now is just get this onto full screen. Here we go. Whiz along. There we go. So we have touched on this a little bit earlier on, and Simon mentioned it too. It's really key to preserving relationships with pupils, which is really, really important in behaviour management. And it's key to avoiding that dead-end confrontation. And it's about removing the audience. So bear in mind that not every behaviour needs to be addressed right now. Some things do, small things. Well, there's a level, isn't there? There's a range. Some things can be ignored tactically. And if you're praising other children as well, then that's great. Everybody realises what's going on. You're choosing to give your attention to the children who are doing the right thing. As the adult, you can choose which behaviours you are going to attend to. And some of the time, it's really advisable in your head to think, you know what, I'm not even going to go there. That's going to be extinguished in a moment all by itself. I'm not going to draw attention to it. That's fine. Where there are bigger issues or where there have been repeated issues, you will need to address that. But my advice would be, wherever you can, to do that one-to-one with the child. Whenever you try to address behaviour publicly, you are automatically shining the spotlight on the interaction between you and the child. And sometimes that can backfire. And that's that dead-end confrontation that we spoke about. So think about the child that you're dealing with. Think to yourself, is this a good idea to draw everyone's attention to this interaction now? Is this going to end well for the both of us? Because we want every intervention, every interaction to end with people coming out with their dignity. We're not about humiliating or embarrassing, because when you do those things, even accidentally, that chips away at the good rapport that you've got between you and the pupil, and it makes it harder in future for them to follow your instructions. So where you can, remove the audience, talk about it later. Second best is to go over and have a quiet word with the pupil. So if you do need to deal with it now, do, but don't do it across the heads of several other kids. So if you call across a class and you say, Jessica, stop rocking on your chair, I can pretty much guarantee whenever you say rocking on your chair, if Jessica stops, then good, but I'll pretty much guarantee somebody else in that classroom will start rocking on their chair. Because what you're doing there is you're actually putting the idea into their heads. So let me give you an example. If I say to you now, don't think about a white elephant. Don't think about a white elephant. Stop thinking about a white elephant. White elephant, white elephant. Why are you thinking about a white elephant? Anybody thinking about a white elephant? Yeah, you can't help it. So use the language of what you do want to happen instead of talking about what you don't want to happen wherever you can. So an example would be if children are running down the corridor, this is a really easy one. Instead of shouting, stop running, and now a load of other children have thought, running, and now they're running too, use walk please, or we walk inside, or walk thank you. So tell them what to do. Whenever you want to stop a behaviour, it's important that you tell them what you want them to start. We sometimes assume that by telling a child to stop doing something that they know what we want them to do instead, but they don't always, they're not always thinking about that. So use the language of what you do want and shine your spotlight on that. And where you can, go over to pupils and have a discreet conversation with them rather than holding up the whole class or picking out some negative behaviour across the heads of other children, because that interrupts the flow. Other children will stop, they'll turn round, start looking at the child who's done something wrong, and for them, that might be enough to fire them up and make them feel defensive or confrontational. So we're trying to remove all of that bad vibes, and we're trying to discreetly manage difficult behaviour. So there's a saying that says, praise in public and correct in private. And that's something where you can to bear in mind. Lots of times, I've definitely done it myself, and lots of times I've seen teachers where they're stood centre stage, just as Simon said, at the front of the class. All of the children in the class are doing the right thing, apart from one, and they've accidentally drawn all of the attention to that one child who's doing the wrong thing. And now they feel vulnerable, they feel exposed, everyone's looking at them. Sometimes that leads them to feel like they need to perform now. Everyone's watching them, so they might as well do something really big, and then you're in that dead-end confrontation. So where you can, go over and talk to the child quietly next to them, or defer that conversation to later when everybody else has gone. Okay. This is a really cool little language strategy that works lots of the time. So imagine that you've got a child who is dead set. Let's imagine that they want to go on the iPad. So you're in the middle of the maths lesson, they've got fed up with the maths, they don't want to do that anymore, and they've said, Miss, I want to go on the iPad. Now you could just say, no, you're not going on the iPad, it's maths. And for most children, they would probably accept that and go and sit down and get on with the maths. but you are going to have a few vulnerable individuals who the word no is going to be a trigger to them. And as soon as you tell them that they can't go on the iPad, boom, there's going to be an explosion. They're not going to be happy about it. They're going to feel like you're challenging them. They're going to let you know that they're not happy about this decision through their behaviour. Now, that doesn't mean that you've got to give in or give them the iPad, but what you can do is be more strategic about saying no by using instead when and then. Really simple, really effective. So they come over to you and they say, Miss, I want to go on the iPad. And you can say, when you've done, and it might not be all of the tasks, sometimes you do need to compromise a little bit for now and maybe revisit it later. But what you might say is, when you've got to question 10, then you can have the iPad. And you might still get some complaining or fussing or shrugging or sighing or eye rolling. That, by the way, is called secondary behaviour, not because it's exclusive to secondary school pupils, although I have got a teenager. But secondary behaviour is any behaviour that happens after you're addressing the first behaviour. So the first behaviour was that he didn't want to do the maths and he wanted the iPad. The eye rolling and the huffing and the puffing is secondary behaviour. And sometimes you will have to bite your tongue because this pushes teachers' buttons big time. But do not get drawn into dealing with that secondary behaviour right now. Ignore that. Sometimes children will huff and puff and eye roll and make a fuss and do the work anyway. I've got a very clear memory of a boy that I taught in a pupil referral unit. His name was Philip. Whenever he was asked to write, he would always say, I'm not doing it. There was usually quite a lot of colourful language in there as well. And as he was saying that, he was actually doing the writing. So it was almost a habit that he developed where he felt like he had to make it known that he didn't like doing it. He said, I'm not going to do it. You can't make me. And he would say all of that as he was actually completing the task. Now, it would have been really easy for me to get locked into a battle with him and say, stop talking to me like that. You're being rude. Why are you saying you're not doing it when you're doing it? What I learned to do was keep quiet, look neutral, ignore, ignore, ignore. He's doing the work. That's what I want him to do. Now, later on, I would have a conversation with him. Usually, we used to play basketball at playtime and I'd get involved and we'd play basketball together. And then on the way in, he'd be holding the ball. And on the way in, I'd have that little micro moment with him and I'd say, you know, when we're doing writing, you know, next time, just try and make a start without complaining about it. Thanks, Phil. End of. No big lecture. Didn't work straight away. He still did a lot of huffing and puffing. But be aware that you don't need to get into secondary behaviour in that moment. So we go back to the boy. He wants to go on the iPad when it's maths. So instead of saying, no, you can't have the iPad, that's what you mean in your head, or you mean not right now. What you say is, when you have, and then tell him what he needs to do, then you can. So when you have completed question 10, then you can have the iPad. And you might get huffing, you might get sighing, you might get panting and eye rolling. What you can do, which is really clever, is take a breath and repeat your instruction. So when you've done to question 10, then you can have the iPad. And you might get some more complaining and more huffing and puffing and shoulder shrugging and negative body language. You can even be really clever and use what's called partial agreement. So you can say yes, when you've done to question 10, then you can have the iPad. Starting with yes is quite disarming for pupils who are oppositional because you're saying that you agree, but actually you are agreeing, but they need to do something first. And when they've done that thing, then they get the iPad. And make sure they do. If you told them they can have the iPad when they get to question 10, don't let them get to question 10 and then say, oh, do 2 more and then you can have it. That's really annoying. If you've made a deal, stick with that deal. So use when and then. I would say if you've had to repeat that 3 times and you're still getting huffing and puffing, that is when I would turn away. Turn away, walk away, deliberately go over to somebody else who is doing the right thing and start talking about their behaviour. Intentionally move all of your focus onto some good stuff that you can see somewhere else in the classroom. That has two big effects. One is it keeps the rest of the class with you and stops them looking at the child who's doing the wrong thing, or even worse, copying him. And two is the child who's in the spotlight then has the spotlight removed, so the pressure is off. You're not standing over them, waiting for them to do it, because there's a dead-end confrontation, and we're not doing that. You're taking the pressure off, you're walking away, you're focusing your attention on good stuff, which is also a reminder to him about what he needs to do to get your attention as well. So when and then. And the be a brick wall is just repeating that sentence that starts with the when and has the then. So don't start flowering it up. Don't use more words. Don't start bargaining, negotiating. Don't go there. Very simple. Cut down on the language. Very clear, very assertive, slow and low delivery. Yes, when you finish question 10, then you can have the iPad. And you say it in a way that you mean what you say. Very calm, very controlled. And that lets them know that you are in control. And again, it lets the rest of the class, who are all earwigging, they can see that you're in control. And it gives feedback to you. You're the boss, you're in control. So when and then, really, really useful little tool there, little language strategy that can get you out of a sticky situation. It won't work 100% of the time. You've got to learn what works. I've used this with my son a lot over the years. He's 15 now, and he knows when I get to the when, he is resigned to the fact that I'm not changing my mind, because he knows that this is what's going to happen, and I am going to stick to that. Even if it means there's going to be a tantrum or a meltdown or whatever, I am going to stick to it. If you don't, they learn that if they push hard enough, you'll give in. So they will keep pushing, and they will keep testing, and they will keep wondering, well, yesterday you let me off, so will you let me off again today? So choose your battles. Don't pick up on every little tiny behaviour. Choose what you need to address now. Think to yourself, is this important for me to deal with right now? Because it sometimes is disrupting 30 students because they're waiting for the learning. Do I need to deal with this now, or can I do it later? If I am going to choose this battle, if I am going to say that this is how it's going to be, I have to be able to make it happen. I have to follow it through. And then be a brick wall. Okay, last little bit now then, just looking at the time. So praise, you can never underestimate the impact of praise. I really liked what Adrian said on Friday about tribal classrooms and about building that team ethos. Praise is a great way to do that. Praise lets the child know that you've noticed them, that you've acknowledged them, that you care about them, that they're valuable, that they're important to you, that they're part of this class. They're on your radar in a positive way. And if you remember, Adrian talked about the negativity bias. So he said that as humans, in evolutionary terms, we are naturally inclined to focus on the negatives or look for bad behaviour. And that's a really easy trap to fall into, especially if you're a bit worried about behaviour management. So instead, look for those little snippets of good behaviour. Notice the kids who are getting it right. Show your classes that you give more time, energy, attention to positive behaviour choices than negative behaviour choices. Most kids, most days, can do the right thing, and then there'll be some who can't for a whole host of reasons. So what you're going to do is give them extra support so that they can do it too. What you're not going to do is allow yourself to get sucked into giving that handful of children all of the attention. Because what a complaint I often hear from children of all different ages is the naughty ones get all the attention. The naughty ones get all the rewards. Nobody notices when you do the right thing. And in schools, when I'm doing training with teachers, they'll often say to me, yes, but what about all the children who are doing the right thing every day? And I think, yeah, great question. What about all those children who are doing the right thing every day? How are you recognizing and acknowledging that? Because yes, it might be easy for them to do that, but they're choosing. Every behavior is a choice, and they are choosing to do what you say. So that is worth acknowledging. And then, as we've said, use those micro moments to build positive relationships. So make the effort, make eye contact every day with every pupil as they enter your class. Notice when they've had their hair cut. Ask them what they had for their tea last night. Find out what they like to do when they're not at school. That is really key, actually. If you learn, so thinking back to Philip, my boy who used to avoid writing, he'd got 2 dogs that he absolutely adored, 2 Staffordshire Bull Terriers. And I went home and Googled Staffies and found out about Staffies. So I knew that I could strike up a conversation with him about Staffies. And he very quickly recognised that I'd made that effort. And when things were a bit rocky, sometimes it was great as a distraction. Now, you can only use that distraction if you've taken the time to find out what floats their boat. You can't talk to every child about Staffordshire Bull Terriers because they don't care about that. So make a little bit of time, have a conversation, find out what they're into when they're not at school. What do they like? What do they watch? What do they play? What do they do? Find out about it and let them tell you about it. People like to talk about things that they're passionate about. So open up those conversations. And when times are good and you can have those conversations, that is all building blocks in your relationship with them. And they'll be much more inclined to follow instructions and do what you request if they feel like you like them and you care about them. Okay, last couple of minutes, I'm going to hand back over to Simon. Let me just pop off.
Right, yes, we promised 12 strategies, but we're going to give you a bonus strategy right now. And that's how to give really effective praise. So we're talking about praise and recognition. When you think about what's the point of giving praise as a classroom teacher, it's to build relationships and to encourage more positive behavior. We want the good behavior in the classroom to spread like wildfire across the entire class. I want you to open the chat box. I've got 4 examples of praise here. We got, thanks, Joe, you're a good boy. Joe, I like the way you held the door open for me, thanks. We've got, thanks for opening the door, Joe, but you shouldn't be wearing trainers. And we've got, aren't you kind? What I'd like you to do in the chat box is write down which of those do you think is the best form of praise? Is it number 1, number 2, number 3, or number 4? I'm just going to open my chat box too so I can see what people are writing. Out of those, if our aim is to spread good behavior like wildfire, which of those is the best form of praise? 2's getting a lot of votes here. 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. We've got a good comment from Jess there. Okay, so the answer is 2. And let's think about why that is. In 2, we start with Joe's name. Now that immediately cues Joe into the fact that you're talking to him. If you don't start the sentence with his name, he might not ever realize that you're giving him praise. Or if you put his name at the end, thanks for holding open the door, Joe. By the time you get to Joe and he turns around and realizes that you're talking to him, he might have missed all the previous sentence. You know that. So we cue him in with his name. So we say Joe, and then we use I like the way. Now what Joe will hear is I like you. But you can't go around to lots of kids saying I like you. Bit creepy. Okay, so what we say is I like the way you, and then we name the exact thing that he did, held open the door. Because when we say the exact thing, we are encouraging Joe to do that again in the future, but also anyone else who's listening, they now know that I am paying attention to kids who are opening doors. So now I've got a bunch of kids running down the corridor to hold open doors for me like I'm like some sort of French king. So Joe, I like the way you held the door open for me. And then the word thanks on the end keeps it in proportion. It keeps it, I hate the word, authentic. But it does keep it authentic. It creates recognition rather than over the top praise, but it can sound fake. That's the best door opening I've ever seen. You know, that almost comes across as sarcastic. So just putting thanks on the end just gives Joe the bit of recognition that he needs to encourage him in the future, and we're being specific. So name, I like the way you, the exact thing they did, and then thanks. 1 and 4 are very woolly. They don't tell Joe exactly what he did, so he might not be able to repeat it in future. The other kids around might not be watching Joe, so they might not know what he's done, so they can't copy his behavior, so it's not going to spread. So 1 and 4 are too woolly. 3 is what I call manager's praise. It's praise with a sting in the tail. Thanks for holding open the door, Joe, but you shouldn't be wearing trainers. Now, what is the only thing out of that sentence that Joe is going to remember, right? He's only going to remember where I shouldn't be wearing trainers. Okay, back to negativity bias, all right? You shouldn't be wearing trainers. Everything before the but is BS, right? The only thing he's going to focus on is the wearing trainers part. Now, if you've had a lesson observation ever, and someone feeds back to you at the end, and they feed back, a couple of positives and 1 negative, what do you think about all the way home? Do you dwell on the 2 really positive aspects that your tutor fed back on? Or are you thinking about the negative part of that feedback? Joe's going to be exactly the same. So never mix praise and correction in the same sentence. If you need to correct Joe for wearing his trainers, either do it earlier, do it afterwards, but do not deliver it at the same time, because you're going to cancel out the positive praise that you're giving. Right, so that's giving praise. I am going to stop sharing my screen. Emma, I don't know if you want to come back in now. We've left some time for if anyone wants to ask any questions. It can be anything that we've spoken about so far. If you've got any fears or worries or things you want to know about teaching in the classroom, or something you've come across before, ask how we could handle it in a different way. Any trips or tricks you're after. So are we opening the floor? So from Meg
says that she's got a question. Yeah,
Meg, would you be... Go on, Emma, go on.
I was just going to say, Meg, if you go to the bottom corner, in fact, if I unmute you now.
Hello. Hiya, I was just wondering, so obviously with the information that's come out last week or so, schools are obviously going to interpret that in different ways. But in a secondary setting, if, for example, you don't have the luxury of walking up and down the classroom and being present in the space and making the space your own, if you don't have that luxury, do you have any tips or advice as to behaviour management when you can't be present in the space?
Absolutely.
In the same way.
Whilst you can't use your physical presence, you can use your words. So using positive praise across class. So, Joe, I can see you working quietly in the corner there, keep it up. And using that proximity praise. So if you can see people starting to come off task, instead of going across, just using your voice to make it clear what's happening in the classroom in usually a positive way. You could also ask a question. Often kids start chattering and getting unfocused. Then you get the low-level behavior. If you see kids getting unfocused, ask them a question about their work, or just ask, oh, where are you up to? Or are you stuck on that question? Do you need any help? That sort of thing. So those little prompts, rather than saying, you should be working, because that's drawing attention to negative behavior. Sometimes you have to address negative behavior, obviously. But if you can catch people just as they're falling off, or you can see they're sort of wavering, or just striking up a couple of seconds of conversation. And you can do that with the whole class too. You will watch the whole class. That class should be able to put their head down in secondary for 45 minutes and work. But they will flag their human beings after 20 minutes. It might be, if you can see they're tired, they're falling off task, time to put their pencils down, do a quick recap of the lesson, talk about the work, give them a chance to kind of recharge, and then set them back to the task. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
So
Hello. I have a question.
Yes, is that Paul?
Cam.
Cam.
Hi.
Sorry, Cam.
You mentioned sort of making eye contact with the pupils as they walk into the classroom. One thing that's going to be happening at my school in September is kids will be staying put, the teachers will be going around, and potentially the kids will be unattended for 5 minutes or so while the teachers move around. What would be the best way to start the lesson in that case, where you're walking into a classroom and kids are sort of potentially getting a bit rowdy because they're unattended?
The kids won't learn until they're in a calm emotional state. So the worst thing, from my opinion, that you can do is just press on anyway. You can't ignore that state. So I would start with a quick calming activity. It might be a very quick quiz. It could be something you put on the whiteboard. It could be putting some calming music on the board. Deadlines focus everyone's attention. And one thing that I found really effective is if you put a timer for 2 minutes on the board and put like a 2-question task on the board, and you just say to everyone, right, the music's on. When that 2-minute timer runs out, I expect everyone to have done 1 and 2. And then obviously you can't walk around the room like we say because of COVID, but you're saying, right, brilliant. You know, Cam, you've got your pencil out, you're already working, excellent. Jamie, do you need help finding your pencil? If you know, that kind of thing. Have a settling activity before you try and jump in.
That's the thing, because you said on the computer, because the first 5 minutes are going to be logging onto the computer because they're going into the classroom. So I was looking at maybe just like a handout, just come in straight with a handout.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only thing I have, because it's going to take a few minutes before the computer and the screen is set up.
And that would give you buffer time then, because while the computer's logging on and sorting itself out, if you've got something you can hand out, that kind of kills that dead time, or you would just be waiting for the computer anyway. Or you could get like a big piece of poster paper and some marker pens and just write it on the poster paper and stick it up with blue tack, something like that.
Already, yeah.
Yeah, you need something that you can calm them and jump in straight away with. If they're rowdy already, making them wait another 5 minutes for a laptop to boot up is it's throwing fuel on the fire. And sometimes it's about not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just because you can't have the perfect solution, sometimes it's finding something that's kind of good enough to get you through the situation. Does that help? Does that give you?
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, I mean, I knew how to sort of calm them down, but it's just kind of what would work in sort of getting that, you know, you walk in and just getting them calm and settled.
Yeah, that calmness is crucial.
Yeah, definitely having a starting activity, and it might even be a little discussion thing. It might be a quiz. It might be a challenge. It might be, I don't know what subject you teach, but it could be related.
It's mathematics.
Maths, okay. So there might be a little challenge up there for them to complete. And you know, the fastest ones who do it get a prize, or it depends whether you want to whip them up or calm them down, to be honest. But it has to be something that gives them the motivation to get to their seat, get started quick, and it's got to be recognised and worth doing. Otherwise, it's just going to be, oh, you know, we wander in, we have a chat, the teacher's messing around with the laptop, we're just messing about. What I would do as well, I know it is difficult to multitask, but even when you're setting the laptop up, still give as much eye contact as you can. Say to the class, bear with me while I set this up. While I'm doing this, can you do this? And then keep scanning. Look for children who are doing it straight away. Draw attention to them so that they know, yeah, you might be busy with the laptop, but you are also scanning continually and drawing attention to good behaviour. Try not to single out the ones who aren't doing it, like we've already said. Don't call across the class to someone who's not doing it, because then you're just highlighting it to everybody. So you've got to do the two things at the same time. Make sure everything is set up the best it can be so that you're literally just plugging in and pressing a button, but spot the children who are doing it right. Thank them. Say, thanks, guys. Thanks for showing maturity. Thanks for getting on straight away. Don't forget you can praise individuals and groups and whole class. So sometimes it can be really beneficial to say thank you everybody who sat down straight away, because then 90% of the class who've done that have been recognised and you're holding them on task. Then the other 10% get another reminder of what they should be doing, and then they might fall in line with that as well. So don't forget you can praise everybody or a group as well as individuals. Individual praise is really valuable and important, but it's very time consuming and it's a lot of talking. Sometimes you can scoop a group together and acknowledge them all in one sentence. So don't forget to do that as well.
Another thing you can do as well while you're doing that is telegraph your praise or a reward. So you can say in 60 seconds, I'm going to pick 3 kids who are doing whatever it is really well. Don't say the fastest, because you just end up with a cavalcade, like a crash. But, you know, in 6 seconds, I'm going to issue 3 house plans or whatever it is you have in your school for 3 kids who are on task and working hard. And another thing to bear in mind is something called the doorway drill. When you walk up to the doorway, those kids are going to watch how you walk in the room. If you look stressed, rushed, flustered, you're going to communicate that emotionally and the kids will pick up on it. So when you hit the doorway, just take a moment and think, right, how am I going to stand? How does how am I going to look assertive? How am I going to walk into this room? Just take a moment, take a deep breath, just calm if you've had to rush from the other side of the building, and walk assertively into the room, because that entrance will make a big difference.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
Anyone else?
For any more? Okay, I've tried to answer the questions in the chat box as well. A couple of people have raised issues there.
Multitasking.
I know, kind of. I think we are coming to the end there. Dave, is there anything else that you're desperate for us to include, or are you happy that we've covered everything there?
No, I think that's a good start. The most important thing is for people to realise that they can ask questions, but we're going to set up an email forum for everybody so they can ask questions, not just about behaviour, about anything at all, and that will give the opportunity for me to direct the questions to you if they're about behaviour.
Perfect. So that ongoing support will be there for people. And I would just want to say to everybody, first of all, congratulations, and then just try and enjoy it. It is really magical. It's really hard and really magical. So
buy a lot of Lemsips. That'd be my advice.
Yeah, vitamins. Take vitamins. Definitely.
But yeah, congratulations, and enjoy it. It's strange times, but wish you every success moving forward.
Great. Okay, so if people need to leave, then feel free to go now. If anybody does want to hang around, we've got probably 3 or 4 minutes where we can answer any other questions. But if you need to go, go. Enjoy the summer holidays. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.